Hi, good afternoon. Well, morning, it's afternoon somewhere, I'm sure. Okay, we lost our screen temporarily, so the cords and the coats and paraphernalia that go along with Buddhist meditation and classes, Dhamma talks, Dharma talks, are gone. I mean, they're totally visible because the screen's gone. And I apologize for that, but you know, life is. There are 84 problems that we're faced with as a human being. The Buddha tells us 84, 84, and out of those 84, he could only help us with one of those problems, and that problem was we don't want any problems, and that in itself is a problem. Okay, so we have been, some of you have been with me a decade or more. Others are new. I like the intimacy of this particular group. You're quiet. The afternoon group is very chatty. And this afternoon we'll be doing the workshop on the three poisons and what they are and how to manage them. And there's some surprises in there. Now, spoiler alert, I'll give you a spoiler. We usually refer to them as ignorance, attachment, and aversion, but that's not their names. Ignorance is never mentioned in context of the three poisons. It is confusion, befuddlement, bewilderment. And that's a little bit different than ignorance. Anyways, so that's one of the things I'm going to be speaking about this afternoon, and the lovely Charlotta Capenye will be here doing the art part of it, the art project, art therapy. And she's very good. She's very good. I thoroughly enjoy her work. I have to say that because she watches these videos. Okay, so the question this morning, though, is what is Buddhism? Well, Buddhism is a religion to which, depending upon whoever you're talking to, is 300 million or 1.1 billion people practice Buddhism. Now, the reason the number is so iffy, so vastly different and inconsistent is how we measure what a Buddhist is. And when we say 300 million, we're actually just talking about Theravada Buddhism. When we say 1.1 billion, we're talking about all forms of Buddhism, whether the person is a declared Buddhist or not. Because in Asia, you can have many, many religions. In the United States, you're only allowed one. You can only be one at a time. You can't be a Catholic Zen person. You have to be either Catholic or Zen. You can be a Catholic. From the Buddhist end, you can be a Catholic who practices Zen. But it's very, very difficult to be a Zenist who practices Catholicism. Because there's these contradictions there. So it makes it a little bit difficult. The word Buddhism is new. It comes from an ancient word. But if you asked these billion or so people, let's be conservative and say 700 million. That would be conservative. And I think even the CIA in America will agree to that number. If you ask the 700 million people, what is Buddhism? 2/3 of them will look at you with a blank stare because they've never heard that word. They don't know what that means. Because in most Asian countries, Buddhism is just known as the way. or the Dharma, or the Dhamma. It's rarely referred to as Buddhism. In China, for instance, if you say Buddhism, what is that? And you can answer back and say, the Tao. Oh, yeah, they know what that is. The Tao according to Shakyamuni, and they know exactly what that is. And Buddha we take to mean the enlightened one, and of course we're wrong. It means literally the one who understands, and it can mean the awakened one. So there's these two thingies that we got going on with that word. It does not mean enlightenment. That is a term that the English gave Buddhism because guess what age they lived in? The age of enlightenment. And so they transferred that word over to Buddhism, which is interesting because a lot of concepts in Buddhism were transferred over. For instance, in 1815, the word ignorance meant something substantially different than what ignorance means today. In 1815, ignorance meant one who ignores. An ignorant person is one who is not seeing something that's obvious to someone else. Today it means stupid. So when we say that people are basically ignorant, we do not mean that they're basically stupid. That would be another word. That would be moha. And that's the word applied to the pig in the Wheel of Life. Moha, stupid, bewildered, confused. In Buddhism, the word that was translated into ignorance is the word avijja in Pali, avidya in Sanskrit, and it means to be blind, to be unseeing or not seeing. And that's where that comes from. I love these notes that I have on my computer. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So the question becomes then, who was the Buddha? The Buddha was a fellow named Siddhartha Gautama. In his language, and the language of the people, Siddhartha Gautama, and in Sanskrit, Siddhartha Gautama. Now, why two different languages? The original manuscripts that we have, the Buddhist teachings, are written in Pali. Pali was the language of the common person. It was the language that you and I would use in conversation. Sanskrit was the literary merchant, legal, religious language. So we have a phenomenon like that in German, the German language, where you have Hochdeutsch, which is, everybody knows Hochdeutsch. It's the language that books are written in, that the law works on. But most people speak Plattdeutsch, or Low German, which is the language of their local community. Or at least this was true in the 60s and 70s and before. What's happened since the German language Reformation is that they tried to consolidate and get rid of a lot of these dialects, which is kind of unfortunate. Anyway, at age 29, traditionally the year 563 before the Common Era, BCE, Buddha was born. And 29 years later, he went out on his path toward enlightenment. Now, all these stories about the Buddha and his path to enlightenment are mythology. They're legends. They're legends meant to teach a lesson of some kind. They're not actually meant to be historically accurate. We take them to be historically accurate, but that accuracy is taken with a dose of salt. It's It's hard to imagine that Siddhartha Gautama got up one day, saw a bunch of drunk, naked ladies, and said, "Oh my God, I have to go seek enlightenment. I'm going to leave my wife, my home, my palace, blah, blah, blah." Very unlikely that that happened. As a matter of fact, in older traditions of this journey to awakening, he did leave at 29, at the age of 29, to go out and seek enlightenment, but he took his wife with him in the earliest forms of the legend. And it's possibly more historically accurate because that was very common back then. So if we're going to talk about male chauvinism, save it to this afternoon, because that's just another concept. The question becomes then, this guy's, there are always questions, right? If he did this, then what happened? Okay, so he becomes enlightened. You have this enlightened guy. Does that mean he became like godlike? No, not even. Because the word enlightenment, or the word awakening, the word Buddho, is what he called himself, Buddho, I am awake, or I understand, has nothing to do with supernatural powers. Enlightenment is a very strange word that we use in English, and part of that is because of mystical Buddhism from Eastern Asia, China, Japan, Tibet. And enlightenment was seen as something as magical, mystical, otherworldly. In the original Pali manuscripts, and I really like Pali, that's why I use it so much, because it's surgically precise. And it shows, it demonstrates the precision that the Buddha thought in. The word, or the idea of enlightenment, is simply this: to see things as they are here and now. That's enlightenment. So all of us have little glimpses of enlightenment, but very few of us practice enlightenment as a way of life. And that's what a Buddha does. That's what an Arahant does. They practice being in the present moment, seeing things as they are. What happens when you can see things as they are, here and now? You don't get upset. You don't run away with your emotions. You still have them, but you don't run away with them. You can still have nice things. You can still have pleasure, but you do not crave them. You do not cling to them. And that is the difference between an enlightened person and an unenlightened person. If you know everything, they say that the Buddha was omniscient. What is omniscience? It's knowing what needs to be known. It's not knowing every bit of data that you could possibly know. That is a Western view of a mythical being. The Buddhist view was that the Buddha knew what he needed to know about reality, here and now, because this is the only reality that there is. There and then does not constitute reality. There and then constitutes a fantasy. So this is what enlightenment means. Do Buddhists worship idols? No. We pay respect to our images, but we do not worship our images. Do we pray? Not really. The word pray means to ask, P-R-A-Y. P-R-E-Y means something else. P-R-A-Y means to beg. And a practicing Buddhist does not do that. They pay respect, they pay honor to the Buddha as more as an ancestor. And all these cosmic Buddhas and Bodhisattvas out there, well, actually in here, because they're not out there. Read the Buddha, and you'll find that out. So, they are honored, they are respected because the qualities they represent are venerable. A person such as myself has a title, venerable, in front of their name. The word venerable does not mean that you should venerate me. The word venerable means is that I am able to venerate. I am able to pay respect to the Buddha and those who practice the Buddha's way, the Buddha Dhamma. That's what venerable means. It doesn't imply any kind of mystical power. It implies something very, very human. When we look at the statue of the Buddha, what are we looking at? First of all, he's sitting erect. He is raising up. He's raising up his consciousness. He's raising up out of the muck and mire that we create for ourselves. His hands are folded in a gesture of calm and peace and equanimity. The gentle smile on his face reminds us about how wonderful peace can actually be in this tumultuous world. The robes remind us that there's something special apart from the ordinary, while still existing in the ordinary. This is what we're venerating. This is Buddha remembrance, Buddha Smriti, as is said in the Pali, or in the Sanskrit, excuse me. The qualities of a Buddha are qualities that are available to us. So when we look at a statue such as this and we bow to the statue, we are paying respects and we are showing gratitude that we have these teachings. We can take these teachings and make them ours. Unlike any other faith-based practice, and Buddhism is not a faith-based practice, but we're sort of lumped into them because we're thought of as a religion. Okay, I'll be a religion if it gets me out of paying taxes this year. Okay, so if you took the books or the book of any other religion that we're familiar with here in the West, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, whatever, and you burn those books, a lot of people would be upset. If Jesus or Moses or Muhammad could be shown never to have existed, a lot of people would be upset. There are things upon which a religion is predicated. It has to be this way in order for the religion to be valid. The sacred book has to be sacred in order for the religion that comes from it to be true. This is not so in Buddhism. In Buddhism, if all of a sudden, for some reason, tomorrow, all Buddhist literature were to disappear, if all Buddhist paraphernalia, statues, malas, and I got mine, all this stuff were to disappear, it doesn't change the Dhamma. Reality still exists. It doesn't change. And Buddhism may be gone, but reality still exists. There is no substance in a piece of paper with writing on it. There is no substance in a belief. There is only substance in reality. We have a saying over here. I don't know where the saying came from. Someday I'll have to research it to find out, because I used to know this stuff. Seeing is believing. So is the opposite of that true? Is believing seeing? No. Believing is not seeing. It's just the opposite of it. That's why in the Sutta to the Kalamas, the Buddha says, don't believe something just because. You've heard it, you've read it, somebody told you, or you heard it from me. Don't believe it just because of that. The word just in front of the word because is very, very important. Because a lot of people take the Sutta to the Kalamas to mean don't believe in anything. The Buddha doesn't say that. The Buddha is giving criteria for belief. Here's why you should believe in something. Because you have directly experienced it. And no book, no teacher, not even your mom and dad, are going to be able to experience that for you. So don't believe anything just because somebody told you that. You have to experience it. And who can experience it? Everybody. The rich, the poor, the old, the young, everybody can experience that. Direct experience of reality. That direct experience of reality tells us three things right off the bat. No thing guarantees happiness, because everything is impermanent. Everything, every event that we experience is stressful when it's predicated on conditioned things. And no thing is worth identifying with. And we can't own anything. That's what direct experience tells us. Things are impermanent, things are stressful, things are not us. That goes for our bodies, our thoughts, our home, our pets, our parents, our jobs, everything. Every event that takes place is not us, is stressful, and impermanent. Question comes up. I did the video and talked about sects one day, and some people's hair caught on fire. Why are there so many types of Buddhism? Well, because of several reasons. One, different cultures emphasize different aspects of life, have different views of life, and so Dhamma was adapted to those, or not Dhamma per se, but the teachings about the Dhamma were adapted. So Chan and Zen look a little bit different than Theravada. Pure Land looks a little different than the others. Nichiren looks different than the others. So we have lots of different forms of Buddhism because the individual has different things going on in their life that they need to address, and they can only understand it in a particular way. So they tend to gravitate toward traditions, lineages, sects that resonate with them. And if it resonates with you, fine. Fine. But again, don't believe it just because you're hearing it from some revered teacher, or that you're reading it from some best-selling book. Believe it because you're experiencing it, that experience is available to you. So the customs and the cultures influence what that form of Buddhism looks like, but the Dhamma stays the same. The teaching does not change. And when we try to change the teachings, then it's not Buddhism anymore. It's fairy dust. When we try to reintroduce the idea of a soul into Buddhism, we're talking fairy dust. When we're trying to reintroduce higher and lower selves into Buddhism, we're talking fairy dust. When we try to different realms of reality, we're talking fairy dust. True, there are different realms, but the Dhamma stays the same, no matter where you're at. It doesn't change. The laws of physics might change. The Dhamma does not. Because what does the Dhamma deal with? Reality is all about consciousness. The human experience. It does not venture outside of the human experience. So we have these preconceptions about what a Buddhist is, what a Buddhist isn't. Oh, they smoke. They're not a real Buddhist. Oh my God, I saw them have a beer with their dinner the other night at a restaurant. They're not a real Buddhist. They're divorced and they're getting remarried already. They're not a Buddhist. We have all this personal criteria of what a spiritual person is and isn't. None of that's applicable to the Dhamma. The Dhamma doesn't care what your criteria is. The Dhamma is just that. Reality is just what it is. And it's going on inside your head. It's not going on in the restaurant, in the car wash, or in the TV set. So this is something that we need to think about. Truth. Where does truth lie? Experiential reality is a matter of opinion, but truth doesn't change. Okay, well, if Buddhism is right, are the other religions wrong? We try to be tolerant of other religions. We do not often criticize other religions. However, while we agree with the moral stance of other religions, the starting point is different, and the end game, the goal of Buddhism, is different. So Buddhism cannot be equivocated with Christianity, for instance. You can't logically compare Buddhism to Judaism. You can't even compare it to Hinduism, or the Vedism that came before Hinduism was formulated, because the goal is different. The platform is different. The worldview is very, very different. So of course we're going to sound alike, because there's only so many ways that you can get through a day in society without getting yourself in trouble. But the psycho-spiritual aspects are different. The metaphysical aspects are different. The goal is different. We seek happiness and peace and calm and freedom here and now. Who cares what happens when you're dead? That doesn't matter. You're not going to experience it anyway. It's here and now. That's the important thing. Is Buddhism scientific? Yeah. Science is knowledge that can be made into a system which depends upon seeing and testing facts and stating general natural laws. The core of Buddhism fits into that definition. As a matter of fact, there are some scientists that say the Abhidhamma, for instance, is the ultimate science. Because everything that is stated in the Buddha Dhamma can be experimented with, shown to be valid. If we're honest, it's always valid. And it fits into a nice, neat system. So yeah, it's scientific. The Buddhism, the Buddha taught only one thing, according to himself. And this is the one thing that his disciples need to fixate on if we're going to fixate on anything, and not run off into fairy dust land. And that is the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, which is the Fourth Noble Truth. There is dukkha, an untranslatable word that we often translate as suffering. It's existential suffering, existential missingness. But let's leave it untranslated. There is this dukkha. There is an origin of dukkha. The cessation of dukkha is possible and imminent. And here's the way you do it. It's horrible. So this is all the Buddha taught. Dukkha and the cessation of dukkha. When we go through the Pali Canon in particular, that's all we see. When we start getting into strange, weird, bizarre metaphysics, like the various kayas, the various jhanas, the various this, that, and the other thing, that's all very interesting. But how does that apply to the relief of suffering? We studied the Four Noble Truths ad nauseum here. That life is filled with existential suffering. That we're born, we grow old, we die, and in the meantime we have all kinds of pains. Having a relationship is painful. Not having a relationship is painful. Having money is painful. Not having money is painful. Being smart is just as painful as being dumb. There's a lot of pain that goes on in our lives, a lot of stress, a lot of needless suffering, because we're not seeing what's there. The second noble truth is that suffering is caused by craving and aversion, attachments and aversions. That's it. I mean, this is very simple stuff. This is not rocket science, but trying to realize it becomes extraordinarily difficult because we're very, very fragile beings with very, very subtle conditioning that causes us to constantly slip back into our befuddled, confused state. We tend to want what we don't have, but we don't want what we do have. It would be so much easier if it was the other way around. Life would be nicer. Third noble truth is that suffering can be overcome and happiness attained. True happiness, true contentment. Not some imaginary contentment and peace and happiness that's going to come to us at some future time in some other world, because somebody is going to bestow that upon us in a heaven, or alternatively, in some weird place called hell. We do that all ourselves. We have that authority, but we give it up. We have the authority to make ourselves happy. We have the authority to see things as they are, but we give it up. We give it up to our teachers, our parents, our lovers, our government, our intellects, our philosophers, to any one of the thousands of New Age religions that sound good but make no sense. We give up our authority so easily. Oh, if only Mary Jean would go out to the prom with me, I'd be happy. I'd be the happiest man on earth. Bullpucky. But we tell ourselves this lie, and we feast on the excrement from the male of the species of the bovine quadruped. How's that? So I got criticized for saying bullshit last week. That better? Okay, what is the fourth noble truth? The fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path, the way out. It's our therapy. Okay, the Eightfold Path deals with our thoughts, our actions, what's successful, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and they're intimately tied with the 5 precepts. Right livelihood is the 5 precepts. How we think harms no other, steals from no other. Right view. The Eightfold Path is intimately entwined with the 5 precepts. If you just practice the 5 precepts diligently, physically, you are physically manifesting the Eightfold Path. If you practice it on a spiritual level and take it deeper and deeper and deeper and think to yourself, well, what does it mean not to harm another? Does gossip harm another? Does cheating on my income tax harm another? Does going to the food bank 10 times a week harm another when I'm only allowed to go once? How do these apply to the Eightfold Path? How do these precepts look when we go on deeper psychological levels? The 5 precepts do not take the life of any living thing. Whoa! Does that mean I can't eat hamburger? I can't enjoy a steak? That's up to you. Personally, I didn't kill it. It's there. It's like a gift. But when you think about it, does that steak taste any better? I mean, some living thing died. When we're thinking about this, how does that affect the way we eat, as well as what we eat? Not to take anything not freely given. Did that cow say, yeah, take me, I'm yours? Its life was not freely given, to my knowledge. To abstain from sexual misconduct and sensual overindulgence is the 3rd precept. Sensual overindulgence. I will never forget that steak or this restaurant because it was just so wonderful. That's sensual overindulgence. To refrain from untrue speech. Just saying that the state gave you happiness was untrue speech. And to avoid intoxication, that is, losing your mindfulness. What happens if you have a beer? Or a glass of whiskey or a cocktail? Just one. You've already affected your judgment. That's the first thing drugs and alcohol affect, our judgment. The first thing when we crave something, it affects our judgment. So intoxication leading to the loss of mindfulness deals with a lot more than just a tailgate party after the game. Sexual misconduct deals with a lot more than just cheating on your significant other. Matter of fact, the Buddha defined sexual misconduct as being in a relationship with someone that is under somebody's guardianship. So, we'll talk about that in 2 weeks when we do the refuges and the ordinations. So, wait up on that. Because that's very, very interesting, how the Buddha defines sexual misconduct and how other forms of moral codes refer to sexual misconduct. Yeah, having sexual relations with someone who is under guardianship. Daughter is under the guardianship of her father. She's living at home. She's living in her own apartment. Not quite true. Children, animals. What about porn? Pornography. Very, very interesting. He doesn't talk about adultery as being sexual misconduct. Now that's an interesting thing too. But let's go on. So what is Buddhism? What is the other thing that Buddha talks about a lot? Karma. When we talk about karma, we're saying everything that happens to you is a result of your karma, either this life or a past life. When we look at the Buddha, what he talks about karma, kama, in the Pali, it's different. It looks different somehow. First of all, he says not everything that happens to you is a result of your karma. Sometimes crap happens. Get over it. It's not your fault. When he talks about karma, he's talking about a mental, a psychological process where you're either happy or you're not. You're either being stressed or you're not stressed. You're either experiencing dukkha or you're not experiencing dukkha. That's karma. It's got nothing to do with if I have a cigarette and I get cancer later. That's not karma. The craving for the cigarette may have been karma, but the result of the smoking the cigarette is cause and effect. That's different than what the Buddha was talking about. But later on, we conflated the two and made it one, because it's easier for our itty-bitty little heads to wrap around. So the Buddha talked about karma. How we think affects our actions. But what happens as the result of our actions are only indirectly the result of our karma, not directly. The actions that are the result of our karma not only affect us, they affect others. The results of that cause, of that action, will affect our mental karma later, or even immediately, or have some sort of residual effect later on down the road. Like we run away with our thoughts, we take out the credit card and we buy a bunch of stuff, and then, wow, we're feeling really, really, really good about it because we own all this stuff now, and then we got to pay the credit card bill by the 16th of the month, and now we're not feeling so good. The feeling not so good is the result of our karma. The credit card bill is the result of an action. The credit card bill is an indirect result. And a lot of other stuff went into manufacturing that credit card bill than just buying the stuff or the desire to buy the stuff. So when we look at karma, we look at this chaotic happenings, events in our lives, and we can't siphon it out. We can't figure it out because it's so very complex. But we, being who we are, what linear thinking, because that's easier to deal with, so we can say everything that happens to us is a result of our karma. Well, if not directly, indirectly. That's what we want to say. But it's not true. Buddha says so. Not everything is the result of a karma, of your karma. The best karma to have is functional karma. We want good karma, not bad karma. No good or bad. The karma is good in as far as it pleases us. The karma is bad as far as it displeases us. And the job of a stream enterer, one who is on the path toward Buddhahood, is to have a karma that is functional. And this is also what the Buddha said. The end goal of Buddhism, when we understand the Four Noble Truths, when we understand the functioning of karma, is wisdom. Wisdom is developed by compassion. This doesn't mean be a good-hearted fool. That's a Western trip. That's not a Buddhist trip. We tend to be sympathetic in the West. We don't tend to be compassionate. Sympathy is an emotional response. Compassion is an intellectual one, based upon wisdom. And the highest wisdom is seeing things as they are, and recognizing that phenomena are incomplete. How do you know they're incomplete? Because they're constantly evolving. That means they're not complete. Only you are complete. You're complete in the sense that you have everything you need. My coffee is incomplete in the sense that it is evolving into something else even as I drink it. Buddhism requires that we seek out ultimate wisdom. And that ultimate wisdom is seeing things for what they are. Are here and now. Not what they were or will be, but as they are here and now. This is true wisdom. This is the ultimate wisdom. Wisdom requires an open, objective unprejudiced mind. Of course we have prejudices. We're human beings. We grew up with prejudices. But we do not have to make those prejudices reality. We do not have to allow them to manifest just because they exist within our stream of consciousness. Because when we do allow a prejudice to arise and exist in our life here and now, we're not practicing. We're not practicing looking at things as they are here and now. We're coloring it, we're shading it. We're turning it into something else. We're turning reality into an illusion. So this path requires courage, patience, flexibility, and a modicum of intelligence. And this is Buddhism in a nutshell. But the important thing that I think we have to walk away with is that compassion is an integral part in all of this. It includes the readiness to give comfort, material, spiritual comfort to others, caring, concern. But ultimately, compassion is about understanding others, understanding that they too are experiencing dukkha. And we can only show that kind of compassion when we ourselves know ourselves through wisdom. And that concludes today's talk. Thank you.